In this video, we're going to be covering the difference between two key Google Analytics tools that a lot of people know of. Obviously, there's Google Analytics 4, which most of the web uses for their website, and then there's Amplitude. So what's the difference? What is this Amplitude? Why is it kind of making waves in the world right now? Now, first and foremost, let me explain to you how I discovered Amplitude, and it kind of gives you some context to where it's coming from. So I started seeing Amplitude pop up a lot with kind of mid-level and larger companies that have a lot of analytics, some sophistication, and they just didn't feel like Google Analytics was doing enough for them in terms of what they wanted to track. And so a lot of these companies are using Amplitude, and they're hiring people who know and have experience with Amplitude or similar kind of more advanced web analytics tools out there. There's others like Mixpanel and so forth, Heap. But today we're going to be covering Amplitude and the difference between that and Google Analytics 4. So that's where I first started hearing rumblings about it, and then I saw it more and more. And then since I worked in the healthcare industry, there's a good amount of these companies who just have probably the strictest regulations when it comes to privacy because of HIPAA and how HIPAA is now being applied on a broader frame to public websites. And therefore, because of these lawsuits and how strict it's become, these healthcare companies, many of which have billions of dollars that are running through their revenue, they're looking for alternatives to Google Analytics 4, which is, by the way, free. So we're going to start the comparison there. And then by the end of this video, you really have a solid understanding of some of the key differences between these two tools so that you can understand which one is the best choice for you. So we'll start with pricing. Now, GA4, obviously, it's free. It's really good. Probably the best free web analytics tool on the market, which is one of the reasons why Google is so amazing and so great and so dominant in the marketplace. They offer so many tools that are free and so good onto the market, and they just capture so much market share that way. And that's why most websites use Google Analytics 4. It gets you most of the way there. You install some tracking code on every page of your site, and then you're good to go. You don't have to stress, and it'll out of the box collect a lot of basic metrics for you. However, if you are an enterprise company where you just have a massive amount of traffic, they will charge. It's called GA360. And in fact, I've even had mid-tier companies run into quota issues, especially when they want to pull that data into a data viz tool like Looker Studio. So just keep that in mind. It depends on the size of your company. Now, of course, Amplitude is not free. I believe they have a free trial or free version that it's very limited. So really the benefit is getting that paid version. But when you're paying, of course, you would expect and you will get a lot of premium features, a lot of things that just make it above and beyond. So let's dive into some of the metrics and things that these two tools collect, because that's really what web analytics is for. It's measuring metrics over time. So with GA4 out of the box, you have very fundamental basic metrics. They're still very useful, but they're basic. If you want an easy setup and you want these metrics to start collecting right away, you can do it. Some examples include website visitors, in terms of amount of page views. There's sessions, there's users. These are all different ways of measuring traffic. There's also engagement rate. You can also measure the time on page. Although you do have to do your own little quick calculation, it'll give you a total time on page, and then you have to average it out. So that's a little bit of a not completely done for you metric, but that's still a metric. And then there's plenty of like demographic metrics. There's you can find out what state, region, country they're from, what device type, what browser type they're using, depending on the privacy and how big your site is. If it's a very small site, then they will implement thresholding, which kind of obscures some of the data so that basically you can't see it out of privacy concerns if it's like a very small data set. So that's one thing they'll do. And then there's a bunch of other basic metrics like that could be of interest to you. Now, what about Amplitude here? What does Amplitude offer instead? Well, Amplitude has a variety of features and uh, fundamentals that just make it different from the previous tools. And in fact, when GA4 came out, it was kind of an attempt to catch up to date with a lot of these competitors. I think it was a fantastic move by Google to do so. They actually forced users to go to GA4 from GA3, and they closed GA3 in 2024, early 2024. And this was an amazing move because Amplitude is an event-based web analytics tool, whereas GA3 was not. And because of that, a lot of things were kind of funky. A lot of metrics were just metrics. And whereas with GA4, everything is event-based. Every interaction you could track is an event. And that just makes the whole web analytics model much simpler and much more useful. For example, one big thing that you could track in GA3 were custom interactions. So another benefit to Google Analytics is that if you have the time to spend to learn Google Tag Manager, there's some custom metrics that you can set up to track if the out-of-the-box metrics aren't good enough. So these are called, or used to be called, events, and these were custom things that you could track. So let's say you wanted to track someone who clicked the add to cart button, or submitted a form submission and became a lead, or purchased a product. These are custom interactions on the site that are not out of the box. So you would have to set up something like Google Tag Manager and then create a custom tag in GTM to track said metric, and that would come through as a custom event. In GA3, you only had 3 slots to give more information about the event. One of those slots was used to name the interaction. So you had the category, action, and label, and with the category, that's what you would name the event. So add underscore to underscore cart, that would be the name. So you really only have 2 other fields to add more information about the event. Whereas with the new GA4 model, you can track any event, and once it becomes an event, you can add, I believe, up to like a lot of parameters, like at least like 20 parameters to that event, which allows you to essentially add a bunch of details to the event. So you can click and add something to the cart, and then it'll also, if you like set it up properly, it can also tell you the page that add to cart happened on. What was the button that was clicked? If you have multiple buttons that say that, you can add the click text, the click URL, all these different information about that event to flesh it out and give more context to it, which is really helpful when you have that button or form on multiple pages, or there's multiple buttons on that page. It really helps pinpoint what that button was and what text it had and what and so forth. Now with Amplitude, a lot of these things are just like, it's more advanced. So you have such a robust ecosystem of things where you can track and measure all these events. And on top of that, it gets much more robust in the tracking. So you can really build entire funnels where you can see like, okay, they were here and then they were here and then they're here. And you can see that over time. You can look at entire customer journeys. And then after they convert, you can do all these different things that are like more advanced, more fun, and more robust than a GA4. You can see how long people stay on your site, how long people they retained, a bunch of post-conversion data that GA4 just doesn't provide. Some of this includes how long customers retain their subscription after they sign up, who converted and who just window shopped, the time it took them to convert, how many converted versus bounced, and so forth. You just can't get that in GA4. They have a very lackluster funnel reporting and customer journey section. They claim to have it in their Explore reports. Believe me, I've tried to use it. I've tried to build it for clients. It's just not that great compared to Amplitude. And as you can see, it's so robust that it works really well for things beyond websites. So if you have a web app, or if you just have an app for a mobile device, or if you have some type of subscription-based software or tool or website, this tool is really great. Like you can calculate churn, you can calculate how many people sign up and how long they stay a customer. These are things that while GA4 is attempting to do, they have a very small, somewhat lackluster kind of churn chart in one of their reports. It's just not even close. It's night and day of a difference. And you can really tell that GA4 is kind of trying to copy Amplitude and try and catch up. And I think it was a really smart move they made in early 2024 to make that shift to GA4 to try and catch up, because they would have fallen more and more behind if they didn't. But I think in certain areas like customer journey mapping and that robust reporting, Amplitude really shines. So especially if you're doing something like an app or some subscription-based tool, those are the areas where GA4 just can't do it. It can't compete. Now that being said, what are the trade-offs? Well, Amplitude has a higher, steeper learning curve. It's not going to be super difficult. It's not rocket science. It's not even close to rocket science or surgery, but it is a steeper learning curve. So if you expect or you want a tool where you can just install and you can intuitively look at the web analytics reports and get some data and reports quickly, and you're a small website, those are all signs that maybe GA4 is where you should start, especially if you've never had a web analytics tool to begin with. That being said, GA4 is not as easy to learn as GA3 was. When they tried to convert over to this event-based model, they made everything more complicated. The reports, the charts, some of them still seem like they're in beta. So even in that field, I think GA4 only has the slight edge. Now Amplitude, I wouldn't say it's that difficult to learn, but I would say you would have to probably spend a good month, give it a month, working and learning at it for at least 5 to 8 hours a week to really start to understand the tool and use it. They have so much flexibility with how you can build the reports, and the caveat to that is now you got to build those reports, and that's not exactly going to be easy to do because you have to understand, okay, I want this type of funnel with these 4 steps. Okay, how do I set it up so that all these 4 steps are part of that funnel? So it's not going to take you 4 years of school like a PhD, but it's going to take you a little bit more time to learn. So what tool do I recommend? What tool do I use? Well, I typically have my clients and just people I work with on Google Analytics 4. It's the free option, it's the most common option, it's the most universal option. However, when they have the budget, when they're ready to get more sophisticated, or when they're forced because of privacy laws, then you have to get off GA4, and then Amplitude is one of a few top choices that are recommended, and for good reason. It's a fantastic tool, but it's not cheap. So you have to have the money to invest in that tool. And if you do, I really think the insights that you can get are above and beyond. Can you get really good similar insights from GA4? It depends. It really depends on what you're after. If you are a subscription-based tool or a mobile app, maybe Amplitude is still going to have the edge. But if you're just looking for drop-off rate, conversions, and you have someone like me who's a digital marketing analyst to come in and set up a lot of those custom tracking events in Google Tag Manager, then you can get a lot of drop-off data and add to cart data, all that type of stuff in a similar way. So put simply, Amplitude shines when it comes to detailed customer journey and post-conversion data reporting, and creating those funnels and seeing those user journeys, especially for subscription services and mobile apps, but obviously also works for websites. Now, GA4 I think is the go-to. It's the gorilla on the market. All the other analytics tools don't come close. It's free for most users. It's probably good enough for most users. So it could be the best tool for you, especially if you're starting out. Let me just conclude here with a real life use case to show you the differences. And then I would like you to like, subscribe, join my free email newsletter. If you're interested in becoming a digital marketing analyst and getting paid to help people with their marketing online and their data, I offer free tips in that email. Link is below. Okay, so An example of a company that might use Amplitude would be Pokemon Go. Pokemon Go is still, believe it or not, a highly profitable mobile app game. Even though it's been out for a few years, it still generates like over $1 billion in revenue per year. So there's tons of data, millions of players across the world that play it, and you would need a sophisticated web analytics tool beyond Google Analytics for sure to be able to map out and draw some insights. You want to know what they're clicking on, what gifts, what shop items are getting them to purchase things with real money, and how long they're staying on the app, what's causing them to engage further. All these like app-based interactions about the user journey to see what type of, let's say, events or gifts or items in the game cause people to spend more time, enjoy the game more, and essentially spend more money with the game. I know it sounds a little superficial, but that's the lifeblood of a business. Obviously, there's other stuff too, like user satisfaction and so forth, but we're not going to get too deep in just this random example. So you're going to need a tool that can map all that stuff, and therefore you want to look at app-based analytics tools, and Google Analytics is really just not going to be able to compete in that market. While you can install GA4 on a app with SDK, it's just not, it doesn't have the metrics. It's trying to, it claims to, it has a few reports and charts, but there's really not much. Now, a use case for GA4 would be the opposite. Let's say you're a small law company, law firm with 10 employees, and you just started a website, you don't have much budget, and you're just getting started with digital marketing. Well, then install GA4 out of the box. You have all these metrics. It's more intuitive than Amplitude. It's free, and it'll get you started understanding some universal concepts in the tool that's so universal that, let's say, you switch jobs, you switch law firms, you still understand GA4. So that's basically the difference. Hopefully you found this video valuable. Leave your comments if you have any requests for future video topics. Thanks for watching.